Welcome to a public lecture sponsored by the Center for Latin American and Iberian Studies. Please be sure to join us for a reception on the second floor after this lecture, and there you will be encouraged, if you want a glass of wine, to sign up for the Center's mailing list of lectures. Gustavo Gutiérrez will also speak tomorrow at this time at St. Thomas More Center, and at 3 o'clock in the afternoon tomorrow at the center, he will celebrate Mass and preach. He will not be preaching tomorrow at the Divinity School. In the year 1701, this is before your time, Gustavo, a collegiate school was founded in Old Saybrook, Connecticut. The reason for the founding of the institution was clearly stated, quote, "For the educating and instruction of youth in good literature, arts, and sciences, so that by the blessings of Almighty God, they may be better fitted for public employment, both in church and in civil state." End quote. The initial enrollment was 2 young men. 17 years later, the school was moved to New Haven and renamed Yale College. The new site for the institution had to do in part with the unique physical design of the city of New Haven. In the middle of the previous century, the town had been laid out as 9 perfect squares, each square 500 cubits wide by 500 cubits long. The design and the measurements are found in the Old Testament book of the prophet Ezekiel, chapter 45. This was the urban plan of the utopian Jerusalem, a sacred metropolis that the Reverend John Davenport wished to establish on a stretch of land in front of 2 outcroppings of granite, also mentioned by the biblical prophet as sacred mountains. Today, they are called East Rock and West Rock. Locating Yale at the heart of this religious landscape was a logical consequence of its identity to, quote, educate youth for public employment in the church. Hence, from its very founding, Yale saw one of its primary goals as the formation of students in ministerial studies and the teaching of the subject called theology, that is, faith-seeking understanding and praxis. In fact, you might say that in its beginnings, Yale was a rather monkish place to live, although I don't think that the Puritan founders would have used that word. Throughout the 19th century, Yale men were woken up at 5 o'clock in the morning. They quickly dressed, rarely showered, and went to the chapel at 5:15 for prayers. At 6 o'clock in the morning, they had a breakfast that consisted of a half loaf of bread and a mug of beer. I have been told that some undergraduates continue that tradition today. Not the early hour nor the prayers, just the breakfast. Then the Yale men went to class from 7 to 3 in the afternoon and studied the biblical languages of Hebrew, Greek, and Latin and related material. Yale students were only allowed to speak Latin even during their recreation time, but it seems that it was rarely enforced. Well, times have certainly changed, and the 2 words that certainly do not apply to Yale today are monkish or puritanical. But the question of the place of religion in the public and secular sphere remains, perhaps with more interest and urgency in recent years and under recent global circumstances. It also remains a concern of an academic institution like Yale University. A significant contributor to that dialogue of faith in the secular sphere is the man who will speak to us today. Father Gustavo Gutiérrez was born and raised in Lima, Peru. He is a priest of the Dominican order, and when not teaching in Lima or in Rome, he is the John Cardinal O'Hara Professor of Theology at the University of Notre Dame. Best known as the founder of Liberation Theology, he studied medicine, literature, psychology, philosophy, and theology, and obtained a doctorate from the Catholic University of Lyon, France. He also holds honorary degrees from 20 other universities and has been awarded the Príncipe de Asturias Prize by the Spanish government and the Legion of Honor Prize by the French government for his work for human dignity and against oppression. His 1971 groundbreaking work entitled A Theology of Liberation, History, Politics, Salvation, explains his notion of loving solidarity with the poor as well as being a protest against poverty. He has written more than a dozen books and hundreds of articles concerning the Church's role in creating social structures of solidarity. And when he is not dictating class or writing, Don Gustavo is the pastor of a tiny parish congregation in the Lima barrio of Rimac. His greatest joy is feeding breakfast to the local children, a luxury that most of them do not have. Please help me welcome Gustavo Gutiérrez.
Well, first of all, many thanks for this invitation and to have the opportunity to share with you some reflections about the situation of the poor people in Latin America and the witness of a key person in our recent history. A key person not only in the Christian milieu, but beyond this, because the witness of Romero is very present in different persons in my continent. Many thanks to Jaime for his introduction, and to you for your presence here this evening. In the middle of the poverty, oppression and sufferings of his people, it seems to me Oscar Romero was a witness of hope. It seems to me, his great message. In one moment he has written this, for example, we have only a value to provide, hope. It seems strange because the situation was so difficult, so bad, and he has tried to raise the hope of his people and the people of the whole Latin America. I would like to present some reflections about about this witness and the fundaments of his witness for him. I have three parts. One, speaking of Romero as a person of two memories. Second, some considerations about Christianity and history, because he was really very committed with the daily life of his people. And finally, to come again, a question of hope, to seed hope. Well, maybe you have already observed I have some difficulties in your language, but your difficulties by experience, I can say, will be above all in the beginning, because my mistakes are always the same. First point, Romero, a person of two memories. The prophets in the Bible recalls the presence of God in human history. And they are persons of two memories. The memory of God, the memory of the love of God, and the memory of the people, especially the poor people. Certainly, interrelated these two memories, but clearly they are the witness of this. It seems to me Romero is a prophetic voice. He was a preacher. His homilies, he was written his homilies. We have several volumes of his homilies. And through this word, the homily, it is easy to see he was really a prophet. But prophet, as I have taken this word in the biblical meaning, the Nabi, the person speaking instead God. It is the role of the prophet. And the prophetic word is nourished with contemplation of God, contemplation of the God's word. Several texts in the Bible about prophets are speaking about this, but this is nourished also by silence, because silence is a condition to listen. And Romero said this, I quote, I feel the people is my prophet. The people, the poor people, that is to say, the people is speaking to me instead of God. We know very well this sentence coming from the Gospel of John. If the word, we can say, no, the word was made flesh. Well, if it is true, we can say this. In the mission of Romero, the suffering flesh of the Salvadorian people was made word. The flesh, the suffering flesh, he was speaking often about the suffering flesh. Carne sufriente. Suffering flesh for him was synonymous to say a person, but concretely a person suffering. And in this sense, we can say he is a prophet. But maybe some words about the meaning in the Bible of memory. Memory is a subject that pervades the whole Bible. It's a central notion in both testaments. But in the Bible, memory is not principally, and certainly not exclusively, related to the past. The first link of memory is with the present. the past is there in memory, but only to give some deepness to the present moment of the believer. Saint Augustine has captured very well the meaning, the biblical meaning of memory when he wrote, "Memory is the present of the past." Present of the past. Memory is not the history of the past times, always in the Bible, is rather to keep in mind the present, nourished certainly by the experience of the past, but is the present. And another characteristic of memory in the Bible is this, is beyond concepts. Memory is oriented to the transformation of reality, the historical social reality. Memory is this, going to this and to change the moment, and is oriented to act. Without these two points, memory related to present and memory related to action, memory is only an intellectual gymnastics, to recall. But in the Bible, these two questions, present and transformation of reality, are central points. And memory, to finish with the notion of memory, is an expression of the God's love. To speak about the memory of God is to speak about the love of God. And it is good for persons also. When the Bible is speaking about the memory of the people, is the memory of the love of God and the memory they must love their neighbors. For what reason we speak about two memories? Well, it is very well known, this expression of Jesus according to Luke and St. Paul, do this in memory of me. It is the institution, we call this normally the institution of the Eucharist. Do this in memory of me. And but it's good, and in the light of some my considerations about memory, to understand well this affirmation, do this in memory of me, is not only to repeat the rite, the Last Supper, is not only to remember the death and the resurrection of Jesus, is the memory of the life, witness, teachings, and of Jesus, is the memory of the whole life. Do this in memory of me, is keep in your memory my witness, my presence among you. This is a communitarian memory. We are doing this in community, not only individually. And I am quoting one text of Romero. Romero said, the Christian people are a people that live on a memory, the remembrance of the cross, but not like a memory of the past. It is memory that becomes present, still more becomes hope of the future. It is very faithful to the biblical meaning in memory. One memory this remembrance of the witness, the life of Jesus. The second one is this. As you know, the three synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, are telling the institution of the Eucharist. And we have not this in the Gospel of John. John, it is true, John is really very free. He's a freelance. Different to other Gospels and so. And we have not this. But even physically, in the Gospel, in the place of the other Gospels are speaking about do this in memory of me, John presents a little fact called, we know this for the Holy Week, the washing of feet of the disciples. It seems a little strange. Apparently, no big relation, and but to wash the feet of the disciples was a sign of very humble service to persons, to other persons. And at the end of this manner to present the washing of feet, in the Gospel of John it is said this: I have, Jesus speaking to his disciples, I have given to you a model to follow. A model. To wash the feet of, is a model to follow. So, I have done for you, should also do. You must continue to wash the feet of other persons. The custom at that time, the washing of feet was one manner to say welcome my persons arriving for the supper, and it was, and Jesus was doing this with his disciples. And you see, this sentence, a model to follow, done for you should also do, are very similar to do this in memory of me. And the word memory is not there, but the expression is very, very similar. And in this, it is the question. I think as Christians, the Christian must do these two things. The memory of the present of the past, memory of Jesus, and the right memory of the teachings of Jesus, and the practice, that is to say, to service, and many other things linked to this. We have in the Gospels 6 times, is the only one case in the 4 Gospels, we have 6 times the presence of one, we call this normally a miracle, the multiplication of loaves. Only one case, 6 times. It's apparently curious. In the 4 Gospels, even John is the only one miracle in common with other Gospels, John, and twice in Matthew, twice in Mark. And only in a very simple manner we can think this. Maybe this fact, this multiplication of loaves, was so strong for the disciples. They recall this because the Gospels are memories. The Gospels are memories of Jesus. This is a Gospel. But for what reason, so several times? because they have understood in this fact we are in the heart of the good news, in the heart of the gospel. To think in this moment to the version of the Gospel of John. You remember the people were following Jesus. Jesus was preaching for hours. In one moment he says to the disciples, give you bread to these persons, to feed these persons. And first answer of the disciples, we have not money. It's too many people. We have not resources to do that. And Jesus ask this, and we have after what we call the miracle, because one little boy had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. I love very much the fish in the text for this reason, because we Christians, when we listen bread, benediction, Eucharist, no. Jesus was very impressed by the hunger of the people, but hunger of the stomach, not a spiritual hunger. He was preaching for hours. It was a stomach. And I say, feed, bread. This is the question. Related to Eucharist, certainly, but only after. And people are eaten, and we have, it is always in the text, not only in John, in the other, they are very similar, the four versions. The 2 others in Matthew and Mark are another context. But it's always the same idea, but another context. Well, and it is said in the text, after the people was eating, we have 12 baskets there. Well, we can ask the question with some naivete, maybe, for what reason 12 and not 11, or 12 and not 14, or 5, or I don't know. Well, it is difficult to say, but maybe if we take the context, is because 12 is the figure of the people of God. 12 tribes, 12 disciples. For this reason, there are 12 disciples. And it is one manner to say, you continue to do what I have done. The meaning of this text is not exactly the multiplication, but to share. It is the miracle of sharing. Sharing even from very few things. 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And to share, it is the meaning of this text. And to me, to share is to service. In this moment, we can say, really, it is in relation with Eucharist. Because to do the memory of Jesus is to recall the witness of Jesus. And washing of feet is to service. And these 2 memories are a key point to understand the witness, not only the witness of Romero, but the witness of every Christian. These 2 memories, they are interconnected, certainly. We know very well the traditional sentence, the Eucharist does the church. Well, we can add in the same sense, with the same value, the washing of feet that is to say the service, the commitment to other persons, does the church also. And it is not only the Eucharist, this liturgical celebration, but the service is doing also the Christian community. Many years ago, more than 40 years ago, Paul VI, the Pope, has written has addressed this message to one big feast. The participation in the Eucharist is a call to correct, to unjust inequalities between persons, sectors, and nations. It's a call. It's not besides, if I have time, I am serving other persons. No, it's not so. I insist on this because Romero was a man of the Eucharist and homilies, but very conscious about this relationship with service, with commitment to other persons. And maybe you remember another short text coming from the Gospel of Matthew. If when you are going to present your offer to the altar, you remember your sibling has something against you, go first to reconcile with your sibling and come after to present your offering. It's not easy to find persons Sunday in the door of the churches to go, and it's not the custom. But it's clear, if you remember, because reconciliation with siblings is a condition to participate. And I can read one text coming from Romero. You know, this text is very interesting because it's the last words. The last big homily of Romero was one Sunday, in March the 24th, but he was assassinated Monday. Monday he was celebrating the Mass, and it was a Mass for an old lady. He knew very well the family, and in this short homily, for this Mass for this lady, Romero has said this is the last because he was shot exactly after these words. The body and the blood of Christ must feed us to give our body and our blood like Christ does, not for ourselves, but in order to be committed to justice and peace for our people. We must be united in the faith and the hope of this prayer for Doña Sarita and for us. Finish. In this moment, he was killed. It is very interesting, it seems to me, and significant, because these words, very, very deep words, justice, peace, commitment, and speaking about a poor person of Salvador, a very poor family, Doña Sarita. In this moment, he was killed. I think it is sometimes we are surprised for the so many precisions in the last hours of Romero, and even during the funeral. I have the opportunity to attend the funeral of Romero. He was killed one Monday. I am arriving to El Salvador Wednesday, and the funeral was Sunday. And the homily of the Mexican Cardinal the Sunday was interrupted, and the Mass was not finished, as the Mass of the assassination was not finished, and our calculation in the afternoon, some hours after the interruption of this, was 40 persons were killed during the funeral. Well, maybe a little more, a little less, maybe. I have seen 13 dead persons, and behind me 5. And you see, were terrible days, certainly, but not only to take our affection, and why not also, but I think this man have had a so deep evangelical witness and life. It is really a guide for our discipleship. And to finish with the two memories, I would like to say this. In this case, of these two memories, we cannot choose. We cannot choose one and to leave the other, because if we choose only one, we are losing both. I cannot say, I can choose service. No. In the memory, according to the Gospels, to do memory of the life of Jesus is central question. But only Eucharist is not possible. Without service, washing feet, we are not faithful to the message of Jesus. I would like to move now to the second part, Christianity and history. I have said several times, in different moments, Romero was a preacher, and curious preacher, because sometimes his homilies were during half hour. Some homilies 40-45 minutes, one or two, 1 hour. And it's not easy for the preachers today to do that, because people will events, historical facts. And in his homilies, we can find what was happening in El Salvador in those years. And in a very classic manner, his homilies had 3 parts. The first one, the situation, historical events, it has happened, this, often with names, in tell place, this family, and so on. And second part, comment of the text, and trying to illuminate the situation from the text of that Sunday, and finally some applications, what's possible to do. For this reason, people were there listening, and I would like to take some ideas from Romero about this question. He has written this. The inspiration is coming from the Gospel of Matthew 25. There is, Romero is speaking, there is a criterion to know if God is close or far from us. All those who are concerned about the hungry one, of the naked one, the poor person, the missing one, the tortured one, the prisoner of any suffering flesh, have God close to them. It is the criterion. The criterion, if you are concerned who is the suffering persons, who is the insignificant person, God is close. You see, it's the same idea in my presentation from the beginning. But this man was not only preaching, but practicing this. And for this reason, he was killed. Clearly, the reason was because he was acting as he was speaking in the same way he was taking commitments. I would like to say, to read some short sentence from Romero. Here, in El Salvador, where Christ is flesh, incarnated, who suffers? Where Christ is flesh, who suffers? It is again Matthew 25, if you give food to a poor person, you are giving this to me. And this identification between Christ and the least, it is the idea in this moment. We really want a church incarnated like Jesus, made real flesh in the Salvadorian reality. I was always surprised reading the homilies of Romero for this manner to speak about persons, flesh. They are flesh, suffering flesh, or Christ flesh. I think it was very concrete, and the language, when the language is faithful to a reality, is an expression of this reality. He says also this: in order to incarnate the Word of God and the Church, we must be in solidarity with the poor and insignificant people. And this, for him, the meaning, the sense of history, the historical facts, events, in history, we must try to become really disciples of Jesus. Suffering was very present in the life and in the homilies of Romero. We can understand. So many people were dying, were killing, really, and we can understand. At the same time, suffering is the biggest challenge to Christian faith and to human consciousness. And I think we have not a full answer to the suffering, above all, the suffering of the innocent people. Suffering is a fact, there present, and we try to illuminate a little bit this question from our Christian faith, but really is not easy. And we cannot say we have a full answer. Well, it is at least my position. But outside of Christian faith, the question is similar. I don't know if you have read some book or novel of a great French writer, Albert Camus. All the novels of Camus were about the question of suffering in humanity. He was not a believer, and all was around this, because with great sensitivity, certainly he was a Nobel Prize in one moment, but above all, very close to this so painful human situation. Well, it is true, but at the same time, Romero was very clear about this idea. He has repeated several times. We were not created for suffering, but for happiness. And it is a conviction. It is true. It is contrary to many experiences. And reading this, I was thinking from my experience as a parish priest in my neighborhood. I was 20 years in my last parish. Above all, women were affirming this. We women, we are born to suffer. And I was struggling against this for 20 years because this idea, we were for suffer. They receive, these poor persons, women, they receive this from their mothers and their families in general, this idea. The starting point is the biological point aspect you can understand, but it's terrible. A person affirming, I am born to suffer. And well, I am not so optimistic about the results of my struggle, because these categories are very deep, very rooted. And some results, maybe more than some, with the young women, because were freer, certainly. But the other were, yeah, maybe you are right, but because it's very, the poor persons have a very misconception. And reality is stronger than us. For example, they say often, well, unfortunately, I was born poor. It is changing, it is true, but this idea is very, very strong. I was born, so affirming this, only one step more, the affirmation will be, it is the will of God to be poor. And suffering, it is the will of God. Well, I think Romero, in the middle of so many sufferings, was speaking about happiness several times, and it's not so innocent. If you take this point of view, you are changing mentalities. It is very important, I think. Romero said the shepherd, the pastor, in his case, must be there where are the suffering people. But he has never accepted suffering, trying to demonstrate this to the people. You are suffering because you are sinners, or because, but no. Always to say no, and Jesus is not come to this world to suffer. He came to announce the gospel. And announcing the gospel, he has met suffering. It is a reason for what I would like to avoid to bless your eventual sensitivity, but I don't know what you think about this film 2-3 years ago about the suffering of Jesus, the film of Egyptian. Terrible. But terrible is non-Christian. And more suffering, more persons are saved. It's not possible. Suffering, it was the price, the cost. The expression is coming from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a German Lutheran theologian. Is the cost of the discipleship. The cost is a price. But we are not here to suffer. And certainly, because suffering is a fact, we need to deal with this, to confront, and to try to understand or to live in a human manner in spite of suffering. I think it's very important this to affirm to the poor people this, because otherwise life is a fate. We are doing some things because it is so. And you remember this beautiful sentence in the mouth of Jesus in the Gospel of John. No one takes my life from me. I lay it down of my own free will. I have choose this. Choose to announce the gospel, not choose suffering. We cannot choose suffering. But we must be ready to pay this price if it is necessary to announce happiness, kingdom, joy to the people. This is the point. And the spirituality of Romero is not a spirituality of suffering. We call this kind of persons martyrs. Martyr means witness, as you know, but through suffering. Well, but it is true. But to look for martyrdom is not Christian. To accept, yes, is another thing. But to want to be martyr is non-Christian, because it means to accept the presence of a hangman, executor. It is not Christian. To want to have one killer. And another writer, French writer, Georges Bernanos, in the Dialogue of Carmelites, has demonstrated this very clear. We cannot wish become martyr. We can accept if is a price for the announce of the gospel, but no more. Two characters in this piece of theater, one young sister, Carmelite, Blanche, and one old sister, and this old sister, strong personality, his biggest wish was to become martyr during the French Revolution. Well, at the end, Blanche was martyr. She was so afraid of this, but she was martyr. And the other was alive. And, I think we must, in front of suffering, and Romero is a very important case for this, we're clear and go to the meaning of these questions. I would like to read also a text of Romero. While it is clear that our church has been the victim of persecution, during the last 3 years, he was Archbishop only 3 years, very short time. It is even more important to observe the reason for persecution. Not only persecution, but the reason for persecution. The persecution comes about because the church is taking the defense of the poor, and because we are assuming the destiny of the poor. It is the cause of the persecution. And in this sense, Romero is, maybe we can call this another kind of martyr. It is martyr of the washing feet. It's the service, but it's a memory to keep in mind. And another text of Romero, when he has seen his death very close. My last talk with him was by phone, and I have finished this talk with a very not so intelligent sentence. I have said at the end, well, Monsignor, happy to listen to you. Take care. Little silence in the phone, and Romero says, in order to take care, Gustavo, I need to leave my country. And his decision was to stay, clearly. Not because he was looking for this, but in order to defend the poor. And to other person, he has said this, I have frequently been threatened with death. I must tell you as a Christian, I do not believe in death, but in resurrection. If they kill me, I will rise again, the Salvadorian people. I say this without vanity, with the greatest humility. As a pastor, I have to give my life for those who I love, which are all Salvadorian people. I would like to go to my third part about hope. After these points about suffering and happiness, because another theme of this man, to go to this. Again, one quotation from him. If God accepts my death, I will be for the liberation of my people and like a testimony of hope in the future. Or this, the Christians have a great mission in this hour of our country, to maintain hope. Hope is not an illusion that impedes to see the reality. On the contrary, hope calls us to watch the reality with the eyes of the faith. I have mentioned this text from homilies, but you know, he was very committed in front of the events in his country. In the last weeks of his life, he has written, for example, a long letter to the president of this country in that time, in February 1980. Please stop arms for El Salvador. Please, no more. Because the army was buying arms and stop this. And you see, were all only beautiful words, theologically speaking, but taking position very clear about these questions. Well, about hope, you know, in the chapter 32 of the book of Jeremiah, we have a very beautiful text. In that moment, the Jewish people is in a very bad situation between two powers, political and military powers, Babylon in the north, Egypt in the south, and it was in war, and in the middle, the Jewish people. And the people were leaving the country because it was really destroyed. In that moment, Jeremiah received the visit of a cousin to him asking this, you know, our uncle is dead and you are the first person with the right to buy his land, su terreno. And well, but you buying a land and these people destroy practically. It is just before what we call the Babylonian exile. Well, and no one was buying nothing, but going out. And Jeremiah says maybe it is a sign to say hope. In order to have really hope, we need to realize hope concretely. In this case, buying a land, and he was doing this, and I think hope is a gift, is a grace, but without our acceptance, without our free will, doesn't signifies means nothing, and to accept the gift of hope means to create reasons for hope, and this is the understanding of Jeremiah. We need to do something very clearly because we have hope, and I think it is our case today also. It is impossible to speak about Romero without speaking about the situation of the poor people in the world. Certainly, I know better the situation of the Latin American people, but I think hope is a very important question for persons, marginalized persons, despised persons, and to create reasons of hope is the true manner to receive the gift of hope. And we must buy land. We must to have a concrete view, and it's not only we must have hope. No, it's more concrete to do something. And I think it was the case of Romero, and for the reason he is so relevant, important for us today. As you know, it was not, unfortunately, the only one case. At least 3 bishops were killed. Before Romero, Angelelli from Argentina. After Romero, Gerardi from Guatemala. Many priests, nuns, lay persons, many. You see, it's a scandal. Latin America is a continent Christian. Well, formally Christian, and Catholic and evangelical Christian. In this continent, we have a inhuman poverty, and we have the assassination of persons trying to change this for Christian reasons. Not only bishops and priests, nuns, lay persons, the Catholic Church, but pastors also from different evangelical churches. Well, you know, this scandal, this contradiction, to be a Christian and to live the majority of population in poverty, is one of the starting points of we call today theology of liberation. This theology was born partially at least from this contradiction, because it's a true scandal. Well, the witness of Romero is clear about this. It seems to me, from him we can say the task of Christian churches is, for one side, to criticize the growing of the gap between rich nations and persons poor countries and poor persons, and to denounce the contempt for human dignity for the insignificant people. From other side, to contribute to raise the hope of the poor. And these two questions, to denounce what is contrary to the will of life of the God of the Bible, and the other side, to nourish the hope of the people are, I think, the task of the church and every Christian. Two little things to finish. In order to create reasons to hope, we must be free persons. Freedom is not only a word belonging to the political field. Freedom is a key word in the Second Testament, in the New Testament. And the second last point is I see theology, the reflection on our faith, as a hermeneutic of hope. Hermeneutic is understanding. Well, to do theology is to reflect about the reasons for hoping, to have hope. Well, one reason, certainly among others, it is true, is the witness as persons as Bishop Romero. Well, my intention was to recall some points of this great man and great Christian. Thank you.
Thank you, Gustavo. Thank you very much. We have some time for questions and answers. And because this lecture is being recorded, I'm going to ask you to use this microphone to ask a question, and please to help me pass the microphone. So who would like to begin?
I remember being startled when I came across in John Dominic Crossan's Birth of Christianity, his reading that Jesus was speaking to people who were one step from destitution, telling them to share with those who were destitute. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that when we think about the redistribution of resources.
Well, I agree with this. I think this sharing is very important. And you know, it is not necessary to have many things in order to share, because it is the lesson of the text of the multiplication of loaves, because it is possible to share from very, very few things. It's possible. I think the destitute needs, for example, friendship. We can say, I have not more friendship to give, to do welcome someone. It doesn't make sense. And the poor are person who is many deprivation, but who is a great necessity of to be listening, to be welcome, and it's very important. I am very diffident if the commitment to the poor is not at the same time friendship with them. Because friendship is one manner to share. Friendship suppose equality. We are not loving someone if I don't consider this person equal to me, equal in dignity. And otherwise I can protect someone. But love, really, friendship, suppose equality. And I was very impressed once in my parish, preparing the feast of Christmas, one old lady preparing something to give to children of the neighborhood. One old lady told me, you know, when I was child, we were going to a parish besides my own parish to receive, I don't know, food, like bread, rice, milk, and so on. But one day, one priest gave me a doll. Well, my intention in this moment is not to enter in the question for what reason dolls are given to girls and not to boys. I know the question, but it's not my point now. But I have a position about this also, but it's not the question. Well, and this person told me, you know, I remember the face of this priest. She was 5 years old. But you know, a doll was not so useful because the rice, bread, milk to eat is very good. And but for her, it was the first doll of his life. It's gratuitous, you know, to offer to destitute for persons our friendship, to be closeness to them. I think is very important, very important. Not only to give material things, also, why not? But not only. The poor are not only the object of our charity, but they are persons. And this is very, very relevant, very important.
Another question?
It is quite honor to listen to your excellent lecture. And my question is that in conclusion, you said theology must be a hermeneutic of hope. If that's the case, what kind of a theological and practical implication or relationship with German theologian Jürgen Moltmann's theology of hope?
Well, this book, famous book of Jürgen Moltmann, is one expression of this. But you know, my affirmation was more general. Any theology, even if I am not affirming I am doing the theology of hope, no. Is theology must be look for reasons. It is in the letter of Peter. We must ready to explain the reasons of our hope. I think theology must do this. What is the reasons of hope? And not only in a conflictual situation as in Salvador, in many other situations. But the book of Moltmann is going in this way. But I repeat, it's more than that. Even I am writing about Christology. Is also one, the meaning is this, to go to this the memory of the present of the past, because to believe in Jesus Christ, it is very clear in the book of Revelation, the Apocalypse, is hope.
Another question?
Thank you very much for so many of the insights and analysis in your lecture. I have a question about the category, as you rethink it, of both happiness and hope. And I wonder if you could reflect on the ways in which your own very well-known and well-formulated engagement with Marxist critical thought, and in particular critiques of present-day market capitalism, and how, with respect to the market in particular and the commodity form, it's precisely happiness and hope that get taken over and become the site of sort of the colonization of the market internal to the self. Could you talk about the ways in which the happiness and the hope that you describe come into conversation with those two other articulations of what happiness and hope consist of?
Well, it's a big question. I maybe to take one point to try to answer your question. Thank you for that. It seems to me today, in this sense, is worse than some decades ago, in the beginning of liberation theology. We are going to a world of excluded persons and not significant for the market. And don't be significant for the market does not exist practically in mentality. And I think these excluded, for me, are a big challenge for these two questions, happiness and hope. What is possible to speak about hope to these persons? I remember this little anecdote in one Christian community. And persons were speaking, very poor persons, some with some work, the other without work. And people working were saying this, the salary is terrible, it's unjust, and so I am oppressed person. And another without employment, he says, I am not even oppressed. I am nothing. I don't exist. I am looking for an oppressor. At least an unjust salary. At least. Terrible. I have heard this. Sense of humor, certainly, at the same time. But terrible. Well, how to speak about hope to these people is not only suffering, oppression, hunger and so, but at the same time to be nothing. Well, I think in this moment, it is not to be against globalization. It don't make sense. To be against globalization as such is to be against electric energy. It don't make sense. But the manner how the globalization is conducted in this case, yes. And we have these non-relevant persons. Well, it's not easy, and to recall their human dignity, to recall their condition of children of God, well, it's not possible to do that only affirming this. You are a child of God. What? Thank you, but concretely, what is the meaning of this? And I was in my parish for a long time preaching under this theoretical question. It was very useful for me to keep this in mind. Wait, and one day, during my homily, one person affirmed, you are really a great humorist. Because you say, God loves us. By preference, we are the first. And you are in this neighborhood, and you know our condition. Really, you are an humorist, because the contradiction is terrible. You know, very theoretical. My people is very polite for this question. Never, never. Maybe personally one day for one person, but never in the church. But for me, as priest, it was very important to avoid only words. And, well, it's a big challenge, a big challenge. I think, but it's not a full answer, friendship with them is very important. Because it's one manner to say, for me, you are a person. Not only to say, for God, you are a person, not for me too. Very concrete. Is not enough, I recognize. And at the same time, any person, even the poorest, have some sense of happiness. They know little humble joys. The poor person are not only victims. They are not crying the whole day. It is not true. You know very well the fiesta. And no, it is not true. Well, but to elaborate, starting from this, I think is very important. But it's not easy. It is a daily work. It's a daily pastoral work when we are working with poor persons.
Gustavo, you mentioned the word fiesta, and we're going to move the conversation into a more informal fiesta, and we're going to invite everyone to meet you upstairs on the second floor for a little food and drink, and to be sure to